Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Mignot, CEO of the experience agency D-Flash. Each week, I bring on an interesting business leader from an interesting industry, and we talk about how they got to where they are, what they do, and the challenges they face along the way. And the conversations are always quite insightful. This one will be no different. So on the line with me today is Michael Ridley from the agency community, where he is the global director of business development and marketing. Mike, it's so lovely to have you on the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here. A big fan, so happy to be a participant.
Wonderful. So as we were chatting before, you've been listening to the podcast, so you know what this question is going to be. Every episode I have, I ask the same very first question. It's always fun to see where it leads my guests to go down memory lane, and I'm sure you'll be no different. So Mike, what was your first job?
So my first job was working at a golf course in the Cayman Islands, but not as a caddy. I was the person that greeted the guest, washed the clubs and the carts, and prepped the guests to go out onto the course. That was my first job, and I would do it every summer at Britannia Golf Course.
How did you end up in the Cayman Islands as a teenager?
Well, I was actually born there. I was born in the Cayman Islands. I grew up there. I went to school in England and Spain and then university in the United States. But the Cayman Islands are my home.
Really? So when you hear that commercial, the Cayman Islands, it's like nails on a chalkboard for you.
Yeah, well, I'll be supportive. I say it, I get nostalgic for my home.
Got it. Wow. What was it like growing up in the Caymans?
It was beautiful, really lovely, and it still is to this day. It's developed a lot more from when I was younger, but it was idyllic is the best way to put it. Lovely, safe island, great community of people, colorful culture. So I can't say enough about a positive experience about it. Wonderful.
So you had probably a really unique upbringing in terms of going from the Cayman Islands to the UK, even though the systems of education are kind of similar. How was that transition for you when you were, growing up in Caymans and going to the UK?
So I went to boarding school at 8 years old. And so I always describe it to people a bit like Harry Potter without any of the wizardry, high every day, and a very traditional English boarding school. And there definitely was culture shocks moving between England and Cayman, but it was a really good experience because Cayman's smaller as an island, and then you get a big country experience. And I became intimately familiar with Miami Airport, going back and forth. But you made great friends on both sides of the pond, and I still hold the friends from boarding school very closely and in touch with many of them because you grow up with them, and then you're also growing up with your family at home. So it was a really interesting experience.
Awesome. That's so cool. And so that's kind of interesting. So how did you get to where you are right now, and what do you do?
Well, it was a winding road, I'll tell you that. So after school in England, I took what they call a gap year. And it's not something that happens in the States so much, but in England...
Oh, now it does.
Oh, it does? Okay. Well, I've dated myself there. But
Leo Obama recently did it, and that's when it got lots and lots of attention. It's like, I have plenty of friends who did gap years.
Oh, okay. But my gap year was I got a job in London for a company called SFX Sports, which has now evolved into Wasserman Sports.
Oh, wow.
Working in sports agency, and it was an amazing experience. And that was while I was applying to university in Boston. And I jumped into university in Boston and went into film school, and it's a really long road. And from there, I went and worked in the movie industry for a while, which was really, really fun. And then I took a step back, and I was starting to get interested in advertising. And I ended up becoming a soccer coach for a year while I applied for grad school. And then I joined a great white shark research boat in South Africa for a little bit. And then I went to grad school and then became an intern at Crispin Porter in Bogusky. So in a space of about 2 years, I went from $150 million movies to interning at $7 an hour. It was quite a humbling experience.
So that, I have to say, I've now done about 50 interviews. I don't think anyone has ever had that much of a winding road in the career,
yes.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it certainly, and all of those experiences, added up to how I ended up working in business development. At Crispin, I was in account management, but Crispin's intern program is phenomenal, and it's basically you can do as much as you want. So I started getting involved in new business, and I ended up going for a full-time job at Deutsche LA. A gentleman called John Deschner hired me, and he was like, again, he's an ex-Crispin guy. He's like, this is the same. Deutsche LA is a magical ad agency, and he was like, the more you do, we'll let you do whatever. So I was doing account management and started working on new business and just fell in love with it. I fell in love with everything about it, the pace, the sort of competitiveness, the team spiritness of it, and ended up evolving into doing that full time.
Wow. It's interesting because it's always fascinating to me how people are able to sort of be at the right place and be at the right time, and then have someone who's like, yeah, just go for it. You're the second person I've had on the show who does business development, who, has had someone be like, okay, if you want to do this, go do this. And you both are, ridiculously successful. So it goes to show what it means to have like sponsorship when you're early on in your career and someone's saying, you know what, go for it.
You're absolutely right. And I think in ad agencies are particularly good at this. And the community where I am now is a big proponent of it, of having an internal sponsor or member to support you and guide you. And yes, you will make a mistake, but that's that phrase of you're not failing, you're not learning. And so that's something that was really important. And that's why I mentioned John by name and Kim Getty and people at Deutsche LA, because they gave me that platform. And Deutsche LA is how I ended up at the community, because a colleague of mine had worked at the community, and she was like, it's one of the most special agencies in the world, and I think you'd be an amazing fit. And she put me in touch with Jose and Joaquin Moya down here and Luis Montero, and thankfully they hired me. And 5 years later, I'm still here.
I'll edit that out. I think that's the heating in my office.
Okay, no worries.
That's incredible. And so now that you're in Miami, so I see that you've reverted back to your home roots of going somewhere where there's warm weather because you're in Miami.
I love palm trees.
I can see that. What's sort of your day-to-day now? Because, I think, as we were saying a little bit earlier, the land of multicultural and cultural marketing is evolving into this beautiful tapestry that is now, spanning out everywhere. It's not being so siloed as it even was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And so how do you all approach that, and how you all work?
Well, it's awesome. We lead with cultural tensions. That's what we do. Every idea insight is based around what's happening in culture, and how what we say is interesting happens where cultures clash. And so we're looking for where these cultures clash. So we have a cultural intelligence group at the agency that is constantly monitoring what's happening. And a lot of this is client agnostic too. Some of it our clients we're doing on their behalf, but we're also fueling our agency with cultural insights all the time. And, that's where the best creative comes from.
That's awesome. And for you, how do you approach business development? Because I think, everyone has their sort of special sauce. I sort of backwards engineered myself into a business development executive because I own an agency. So I just, I sell, and I'm also the face of the business. So by default, I'm the one who most clients want to talk to and say hi to and have a drink with.
I would like to do that too sometime.
Well, this is going to happen because you're in Miami and I love Miami. So, trust me, that will happen soon. But yeah, how do you guys approach it?
So, there's a couple of ways we go about it. I am the contact point for the agency, and we're fortunate that there's a lot of outreach to us. And then, I also talk to a lot of potential clients and meeting people. And my rule is I turn up, follow up, and I'm polite. That's my secret sauce. Literally, that's the equation. I love meeting people. And one of my biggest pet peeves with the world in general is that manners have gone out the window. And I really try to be as polite as possible. And it's amazing how receptive people will be when you're polite. And, the fact that I have an amazing agency behind me that I'm representing, that is culturally attuned and very cool and making progressive work and leading in the category in some ways also makes it very appealing for people to talk to me.
I think I have the title of our episode, Turn Up, Follow Up, and Be Polite. So just making a note of that right now.
Great. Well, we like to come up with taglines in advertising.
It's how we live. And, I think, we have this issue that we always see that folks are having more and more, that they miss the culture entirely with all of these advertising fails, whether it be the Pepsi ad with Kendall Jenner a couple of years ago to the most recent thing happening with Gucci and Prada. How are you guys approaching that as a cultural agency and sort of arming your clients not to make those kinds of mistakes, or if they do, how to own up and then move on and make actionable changes so they don't happen again?
No, and that's, one of the things we say is that highlights why it's good to have an outside point of view. Because Pepsi, with respect to that and their internal agency, and I believe it was internally done, they didn't have that outside culturally sensitive perspective that we have that would say, hold on a minute, this could be bad, this may not work. And that's one of the healthy tensions that advertising agencies and clients have, because ad agencies come with strong opinions, and we certainly come with a very strong opinion on stuff. And, and that's important to have. And that's where the interesting and the clash happens. And so we have very robust conversations. And some people say we overthink things, but the truth is we're looking at every single potential cultural backlash or angle before making a recommendation to our clients.
Yeah, because I feel like, it happens so, or it's you always look at, well, was there no one in the room who had the agency to speak up when these things were happening? And or was everyone so afraid of getting fired that no one wanted to speak up, and that's why these things happen? Are you seeing more and more of this, or are you just seeing that your clients are being like, how do we arm ourselves more intelligently in terms of having a more diverse group of people who are in the room, but also, even if the room is not as diverse as it could be, the people in those rooms are being mindful of how they're building these campaigns?
Well, I think as an agency, we are diverse naturally. I think over 80% of our employees identify as diverse. So we are lucky because we reflect the actual America that exists. So that's really, really important. And that's one thing many clients comment on when they first meet us, was like, you are America. You are this multicultural, multidimensional new America. And that's very helpful. And sometimes in an internal corporate culture, that isn't necessarily reflected. So that's why companies go to outside agencies to make sure it is reflected. Now, I have to say a lot of companies, and we applaud them, are making much more effort to ensure the appropriate diversity is in place in their companies to ensure this doesn't happen. And I think these errors underscore the importance of diversity in the marketplace, because that wouldn't happen with the right thinkers in the room.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's they make a mistake enough, and then all of a sudden, now we have to pay attention.
Exactly. And I mean, and what we want to make sure is that people are able to be brave and make the right choices. And brave is sometimes scary, but you can also, by having the right partner and the right agency, that's, it helps you take the jump together, because ad agencies and the community in particular, we are brave and we like to push the boundaries as much as possible. And I think it's important that clients have partners like that. And, the best agencies out there are always championing brave thinking, whether it's Droga, 72 and Sunny, Anomaly, Giant Spoon. There's a great multicultural agency called Kashmir that's really making some noise. And they're brave thinkers.
Awesome. And, looking back on your incredible background of experiences, what would you tell 25-year-old Mike? Now, I know that was like 3 years ago, but still.
No, 10 years ago at least, I think. I found out this year I'm turning 37. I was saying to my fiance, I'm 36 this year. She was like, no, babe, you're 37. So but I would tell my 25-year-old self, be patient. The thing is, and it's worse with even younger generations. I grew up in a generation where instant gratification was starting to take place, and everything was starting to happen as you wanted it. And unfortunately, that programs you to believe, well, in professional careers, that should happen too. Now, some people, they get huge amount of success straight away when they're very young, and good for them. But almost every single one of them would say, I got lucky. And the truth is, success comes from being patient. And the other thing I would tell myself is have a North Star. And then every decision you're making is helping you get to that North Star. So when at 25, funny enough, was when I started to think about advertising. And I was seeing what Crispin's work was. And my North Star was intern at Crispin Porter and Bogusky. So every decision then became about how do I position myself best to get there?
Wow. So that was your initial, like, that's where you wanted to go. You knew it was Crispin Porter.
I just knew at that time, and they were the best agency in the country, and their internship programs were amazing. And so I was like, if I'm going to do advertising, I want to work for the best. Just as when I wanted to do sports agency, I went and worked for the best sports agency at the time, who listed David Beckham as their client and Michael Owen and these other huge names. And when I wanted to do the movie industry, I wanted to work for the best. And so I worked at Universal Pictures, and I worked for Michael Bay and Scott Stuber, who's president of Netflix. And so it was a no-brainer, but to be like, okay, Crispin's the best. How do we get there? And that became the North Star. And every decision was then made about how do I get there? And that's the same thing which happened with the community. I was like, I want to go to Miami and I want to work at this ad agency. How do I make it happen? And you work backwards and visualize it. So patience and North Star is my 2 bits of advice.
Wow. I think that's, we're of the same late millennial ilk in terms of our age, where, we grew up, we're sort of the halvesies people, because we grew up when the internet was just blowing up. Facebook was just hitting everyone's phone. But there was a time before that when we were in school where it wasn't complete and total instant gratification. Like you had to write things down.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because while I was at Boston University studying film, Mark Zuckerberg was across the river changing the world at Harvard. And so I always think about that sometimes. But you're right, there was a change literally and it's a strange one. We're like the hybrid generation, but new generations, it happens instantaneously. I mean, I see people get angry when an Uber or a Lyft, it takes more than a minute for them to find the driver. And you're like, guys, that's got to go somewhere into the space, internet world, bounce down, find a driver that's near you, locate your address. And so it amuses me and also saddens me.
It's interesting because, I have sort of taken on this interesting universe of sort of having this network of female friends who are 45 and over. And some of them you can tell they're 45, some of them you can't tell that they're 45. But I have gravitated more to this group of amazing women for one of the reasons is because they've been successful before the world was at your fingers. And I think it's really important that you have conversations and you build relationships and you learn from people who knew how to be successful when everything wasn't so easy. Because that'll give you the best foundation in order to be successful now. Because looking at the world around you, you think, oh, I just snap my fingers. I can Google, snap my fingers. I can Instagram. I can get a car brought to my door within 2 minutes. When you used to hail a cab or you'd have to walk the bus like in the rain.
The glory days. No, you're absolutely right. And I think that's something I learn every day from Jose Moya, who's one of the founders of the community. He always tells me in pitches, remember, Mike, it's never been easier to connect with people, but it's actually never been harder because there's so much noise and so much expectation. So you've really got to be very on point and quick to what you're trying to say as a message and a brand. And as we go into pitches, that's always a filter he asks me to look at. And I think he's got a brilliant mind from, of the older days. And he also has a great understanding of the digital social world and how you've got to cut through the noise to get your message. And I think it's important that he has experiences from when it wasn't an instant world. And now he's, very much a leader in the digital social world than we are as an agency. And I think it's critical to look at that way and say, hey, it's never been easier to connect with everyone, but it's never been harder. So you've really got to think of what you're trying to say and do it spot on.
Exactly. Like spot on is so, so key. So speaking about that and walking in the clients and pitches, was there a time when you walked into something and you're like, whoa, this is going to be way more challenging than I expected, or this is a mess, how do we solve
it? Well, no, I think, by the time the community, we're what we call an all-in agency. So when we go for a pitch, we put everything into it of just brain power, emotion, heart, soul, energy. And so we've gone in and we're in very, very good shape by the time we go into the room. And often what we tell the clients is, the magnitude, we explain actually the magnitude of their problem is like this, it's not this. And it's often rephrasing the problem and bringing focus to the problem. So sometimes you will get something from a client and you're like, actually, before we start, we're like, oof, this looks messy. But then our job is to bring focus to it, because a client may think X is the problem, but actually it's Y. And our job is to focus on how to solve the Y, because from our cultural understanding and research that we've done, we found their problem is actually completely different. Now, not all clients like being told that they've misread what their problem is, but we stand by our recommendations. And so usually by the time we get in the room, we've got a very strong opinion. And I'd say usually, in fact, every time we go into a room, we have a strong formulated opinion that we're going to stand by. And I've seen some clients not agree with it and say, thank you very much. And we shake hands and go the other way. And other clients are like, my goodness, welcome into our internal madness that we have to fix.
and when you're in that internal madness, how do you guys approach solving that? Because I think that's oftentimes the toughest part for folks in agencies, because they're so worried about not ticking off their client that it stunts the kind of work that they can do. And it sounds to me like you guys, you're going to push through all the way and make sure the client gets what they need to get for real and not fuzziness.
Exactly. Another phrase we have is that the right no's will get you further than the wrong yeses. And that's critical, what we think of when we go in. And, there may be internal madness, and our job is but we're not here to help you with the internal madness. Our job is to work for the brand with you as a team. So what we have to do is what's right for the brand, not necessarily what's right for the client's internal madness. And, there's a tension that happens with that, because advertising is a service business, but it's also an opinion ideas business. So it's two, polar opposites. And we have a strong opinion at the community, and we stand by it. And we often say, no, you're wrong. And it takes the right client to be okay with that relationship too. Not all clients are the right clients for us. We need a very strong client on the other side, and someone who's collaborative and willing to listen to and values what agencies bring to the table. And when you get that, you get very long relationships. I mean, the community and Verizon have been working together for almost 5 years now with great success. Diego Scotti, the CMO there, is an incredible thinker. Constellation Brands we've been with for 9 years now, and we work with multiple brands underneath the banner. We've started a relationship with Mondelez last year, which is, I love them. They're brilliant thinkers and they're very culturally attuned. And so when, that's my favorite moment, when I realize, okay, this isn't just the right opportunity in the right time. It's the right opportunity, the right time, and the right clients and the right agency. And when that equation comes together, it's pretty special.
Awesome. It sounds like you guys have really kind of honed in on how to do this right. And when dealing with, all these different kinds of cultures, especially when you guys are sort of a culturally focused agency, how are you finding, I saw that thing on your website with the things you're doing with Detroit, and I was just blown away. How do you guys find those programs? How are you guys sourcing out into the universe? And what's it like when you walk in? Because you're a white guy. So when you walk into the hood of Detroit and hey, you want to do this program, how are you responding?
Yeah, it's interesting. So landings is what you're talking about, the Detroit cultural tensions we're looking for there. And we've done it in Los Angeles, Bogota, London, and other cities. Now, the cultural intelligence team goes and does this. I help facilitate it. But the truth is, people embrace it. If you're going into the underground cultures in these cities, which in the end, in 3 years or 2 years, may actually influence the whole, those artists, those people feeling that underground culture are very progressive and collaborative thinkers, and they want to share what they're doing. And the funny thing is absolutely, I am pasty white and ghosty. And most people are very confused when they hear I'm from the Cayman Islands, because they're not.
How did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. But the truth is, I'm actually very multicultural, and how I identify as multicultural because I grew up in the Cayman Islands. I went to school in England. I went to school in Spain. I lived in Hong Kong. And then I came to the United States. When I worked in the movie industry, I lived in the Dominican Republic, in Canada, in Paris, all over the States, in Austin, Chicago, San Francisco, Boston. And all of these different cultures have make up my identity. And so this is something we talk about in the agency too, is this notion of cultural fluidity, the ability to move seamlessly between the various cultures and subcultures that you identify with. So take, for example, you'd be like, okay, Mike is 36 and from the Cayman Islands, but actually I'm more than that, you know, or say Elena, who's Dominican and a mother. That's old segmentation isn't right, because Elena is also a very successful art director maybe, and she's a yoga instructor, and she loves Netflix, and she's got her social life, and she's, you know, loves Starbucks in the morning, but come the evening she wants to have a glass of wine. And you've got to understand how people are moving in and out of the cultures that they relate to. And that, when we talk about cultural fluidity, everyone's like, yes, that's awesome. And so that's why landings and the places we go really embrace what we're trying to preach, because they understand it. And these up and coming influencers and culture makers want to be partnering with us to talk about what they're doing and how they represent this culturally fluid consumer and the new America.
Well, that's something I really want to dig in on, because I feel it too, because oftentimes I get the same thing because people have zero idea who and what I am, because like Laura's 30, blah.
Exactly, yeah.
But born in England, grew up on Long Island, went to school in New York City, but equal parts love all things high fashion, but also likes the WWE, loves, will drink 4 to 5 cups of English breakfast tea a day, but once it's 6 o'clock, give me a Hendrickson tonic. Like, what bucket could you put me in?
Exactly. And that's the thing, you shouldn't, no brand or person should try and bucket you. You're a culturally rich and diverse person, and how you identify and what you identify with is constantly changing. That's not to say you don't have core values which don't change, but if anyone just segments you in the old way of segmenting, then they're not recognizing, especially for brands, they're not recognizing the realities of today's consumer.
Yeah, I think that, that's the thing that I think why a lot of these fails happen, is that they still keep putting people into these monolithic silos that they assume haven't evolved, forgetting that because of the way the world has changed in the last, even like 4 years ago, if you said, hey, I'm a founder who wants to talk about mental health and meditation and actually slowing down, you probably would have been laughed out of the room. Flip to now, even in this little segment, and I'm not giving any demographic information about an entrepreneur other than to say an entrepreneur, if you don't say that you're an entrepreneur who's actually meditating, who's paying much more attention to your health and wellness, you get that sort of weird look on your face from people like, why aren't you doing that? And because of the fact that those things are happening in such short windows now, that everyone is sort of this multi-pronged hybrid, that it seems like it's almost impossible for brands to catch up and make sure they're actually talking to people who will actually want to be interested in their products.
Well, you're absolutely right. And so the key is to make sure you're moving at the speed of culture as a brand and as your partner agency. And that's something we try to do at the community, because people are moving in and out of this so quickly that if you're not moving at the speed of culture, the chance is gone. The chance to show a person, a consumer, that you as a brand really get them will be gone in an instant. So we spend a lot of time doing that, of tracking culture and what's going on, and offering ideas up to our clients of how to connect. People, it used to be trend spotting. What we do at the community is culture spotting, culture dives, culture digging. What's happening there? What is happening in culture, and getting ahead of it so that we can present some opportunities to our clients. And also, as the demographics of the United States continue to change, that's where the growth in their consumer base will come from: culturally rich and culturally diverse and culturally fluid consumers.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see. I mean, like I said, we've seen such a flip in how our clients come to us and the things they want us to build, from where we were 3 years ago to where we are right now. And I think the reason that we've been similar, well equipped, is to be, we'd always looked at everything from a cultural perspective. We weren't looking at this because you have to get these sorts of people. Like, what does a tech founder look like? There's no ideal monolith of what that looks like, much less who loves a typical kind of young adult book. Like that person can be any number of individuals. Like I always go back to my favorite example of this when we first started, and we didn't put any name around it. And it was, we did an event for Chevy, and we were doing these pop-up events all around the country, and each city was a different group of people that we were trying to attract. And it was people we were finding on social media who would come and be the quote unquote influencers for this particular kind of Chevy vehicle. And it was a smaller hybrid vehicle. And I'll never forget that when we were in New York, and the diversity of the people who walked in that room. So you had your Mohawk skateboarding black guy, you had this awesome diva black woman, but then you also had this working mom, you had this kind of skater kid who might have been just out of college, and then you had like a retired older white man. And I remember the client saying to me, these are the people who are the most influential. I'm like, yes, on social media. And I was like, they all had their different reasons as to why they had affinity to your brand. The skateboarding kid, everyone in his family had a Chevy. From his uncle, his grandmother, his father, his mom, they all had Chevy. So of course he'd want one. The working mom didn't want to have a big old SUV because she's always on the go, and having something that you can move into small parking spaces made better sense for her. Retired dad, same deal. Didn't want to be bothered, need something that was a quick station-to-station car. And that was 6-7 years ago. And the kind of scales coming off the eyes of our client back then of like, this is what this data can tell you, so that you can be smarter about how you can talk to people who are not your initially thought of consumers. But isn't this awesome? You can talk to all these other people in really unique and interesting ways.
Yeah, and that's and credit to you guys for doing that and helping to push a brand like Chevy that may not have knew about this reality to get there. And I'm sure they saw great success from it. So that's a great example of understanding cultural fluidity and helping a brand understand it too. So my hat is off to you there.
Oh yeah, it was quite hilarious because we were like, yeah, like this is love your brand.
I'd love to have seen the face when they would be like, I'm sorry, what? That's great, though. And I'm sure they were very grateful, and they.
That's the crazy part.
Yeah.
Two of those influencers who were in that program, I want to say like 7 years ago, are still working with Chevy.
Wow, that's amazing.
Because their followings have grown, the things they've done with Chevy have grown, the partnerships they've done have grown. And it's heartening to see because they've also gotten older. They've changes in their lives. Some have got married, some of them have kids, and to see that like they're still doing interesting campaigns goes to show that when you build relationships with people who actually are in it for something larger than just this chat today, but really about moving the conversation forward, the better off you're going to be. So it's pretty heartening to see how that actually ended up shaking out.
No, but that's great, and that's fantastic. But it shows these influencers are evolving too as they go on. It's really important that brands evolve with them as well.
And so for you guys, what's your next year and a half look like? What are you hoping to do? You said you're engaged, so I'm hoping getting married.
Yeah.
In Caymans.
Yeah, that's happening. But is in the next year for the agency? Well, we've been on a great growth story. We're committed to keep growing. We've committed to culture first advertising. And I think we would continue to push ourselves to put the very, very best creative and strategic work out there. And that's our goal. It's you never know what opportunities are going to come, but we're going to put 100% into all of them. And that would be our plan, put some great work out there, keep continuing what we're doing with the network story for Verizon, best for a good reason. We've got some new work coming out for some other newer clients, which is really exciting. And I think we just launched something as well called Bridges in Miami, where we're using AI to understand the drawbridges to stop traffic problems, because no one knows when these bridges go up. And so we put these cameras around the city, and we're using AI to be able to predict when and where and when they're going to go up. And I think we'll continue to focus on innovation. We've got a guy called Chris Neff and a gentleman called Rafa Franzini in that department who, are product innovation. We're bringing ideas for our clients and new products. And that's what we'll continue to do, a commitment to creativity, culture, and strategy.
And I love how you guys are looking at technology, but in a cultural sense, because I've seen those drawbridges in Miami, and it's always a crapshoot.
It's awful, right?
And I'm like, how has no one figured out the timing around this? It's like, no one knows.
No, it's crazy. But people have been really receptive, and brands have also been very receptive in partnering with it. And, I can't say the brand that's partnering as this rolls out properly just yet, but it's a very progressive brand that's committed to technology as well. And we're super excited because we are using creativity to solve not just a business problem, a cultural problem in a maritime city. And it's really fun to see how they brought that to life. And, Joaquin Moya, who's one of the other founders, is deeply committed to these sort of ideas. And we encourage all of our creatives and strategists and people at the community to spend certain amount of their time on their own projects that they believe in, and they can come to the agency and we will support them. And Bridges is an example of it, where the agency, Rafa and Chris and Joaquin had a thought, and Joaquin was like, we should do this, and voila, it's happening. So I think we'll be committed to that too.
Awesome. That's so cool. It's always fascinating and wonderful to see when agencies and people within the agencies, one, feel like they can go out and focus on some side projects, and then come back and get the support of their agencies to be like, hey, this is something that we think we're really passionate about, and then to act on it and it be successful. And I think it's an awesome testament to what you guys are doing at the community.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, it's not just talking the talk, it's walking the walk and really championing our people. And if our people are doing great things, we want them to shine, and that's something Bridget Pla, who's our head of talent, and Tracy McDonough have been great at doing, have been empowering our people, and I think that's what I love about our partnership with Verizon as well, is they're championing diversity and they're working with us, and they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk. And together, I think we're making, taking the right strides, and I believe we're leaders in the agency world doing it, and I hope other people will take inspiration from it.
Awesome. I think, it's such a refreshing conversation to have with someone who gets it and is, walking the walk and actually, making these cool changes happen and getting brands to say yes to this stuff. Mike, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
No, you're an absolute delight, and thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing who you speak to next, because I've got a lot of great insights listening to some of the people you've had on. So please keep doing what you're doing and championing culture. And I look forward to seeing your next activation.
I think you're going to see it sooner rather than later.
No, it's good. But honestly, this is fabulous. Really delightful to talk to you. And I look forward to meeting you live.
Awesome. Likewise. Thanks, everyone. And that's our show.